That morning, Tessa did not expect anything to change. She unlocked her small garage on the south side of Chicago, pushed the heavy metal door up with both hands, and stepped inside like she did every single day. The familiar smell of oil, dust, and old metal wrapped around her like an old friend. The floor was cracked in a dozen places. The tools were worn and honest. The stack of unpaid bills sat waiting on her workbench, silent but heavy. Tessa wiped her hands on her worn jeans and started the day's first job, fixing an old car that barely ran anymore. She was bent under the hood, focused and quiet, when she heard it. A sound that simply did not belong on this street. A quiet, smooth engine rolled slowly down the block. Tessa straightened up, wiping sweat from her brow. A gleaming black SUV, spotless and expensive, came to a stop right in front of her garage. It looked completely out of place, like it had taken a wrong turn into someone else's life. Before Tessa could even wonder why it was there, the back door opened. A young girl stepped out carefully, her legs locked inside heavy metal braces. Each step looked forced, painful, and unsure. She held onto the door frame as if the ground itself might disappear beneath her. Behind her came a woman dressed in calm, quiet confidence, the kind that only years of money and control can build. Tessa did not know her name yet, but she could feel the power in the air. Tessa watched silently as the girl tried to stand straight and failed. Something deep inside Tessa tightened. She had spent her whole life looking at broken engines, bent frames, worn joints, and misaligned parts. And right now, watching this girl struggle, one clear and frightening thought filled her mind: something is wrong. Not with the girl, with what is holding her up. Tessa had no right to think that. No title, no permission, no fancy degree. But once she saw it, she could not unsee it. And that was the exact moment Tessa had to choose. Stay silent and let the girl walk away in pain, or speak up and risk everything she had built. Because if she was wrong, a billionaire would never forgive her. And if she was right, this ordinary day would change 3 lives forever. Stay with me until the very end of this story, because what happens inside that small garage will change everything. And the final moment will prove that real miracles do not come from money or power, but from one brave choice made when no one else was watching. Tessa opened her garage that morning the same way she always did, slowly, with both hands pushing the heavy metal door upward. The door screeched in protest, a sound she had grown used to over the years. Dust danced in the morning light as it poured into the small space. The garage was tiny, worn, and quiet, except for the distant hum of Chicago traffic. She stepped inside and stood still for a moment, taking it all in. The cracked concrete floor, the dark oil stains, the tired tools hanging on the wall, they all felt like home. This place was not much, but it was hers. She wiped her hands on her faded jeans and walked toward the wooden workbench where the unpaid bills sat in a small, neat stack. She did not touch them. She never did in the morning. Looking at them too early made the whole day feel heavier. Tessa bent over the hood of an old sedan parked inside. The car belonged to a delivery driver who could barely afford the parts. She had promised him she would fix it as cheaply as humanly possible. Her hands moved with quiet focus as she loosened a bolt. Fixing cars made sense to her. Metal followed rules. Pressure, balance, and movement all told a story if you knew how to listen. That was when she heard it again, the soft, smooth engine sound rolling down the street. Tessa froze. Cars in this Neighborhood usually rattled, coughed, or screamed for help. This one moved like it knew exactly where it was going. She straightened slowly and stepped outside. The black SUV had stopped right in front of her garage. It was clean, polished, and shining under the sun. It looked completely out of place on the broken asphalt, like it had wandered into the wrong life. Tessa frowned slightly. She had never seen a car like that stop here before. The driver stepped out first, walked around, and opened the back door with practiced care. Tessa stayed where she was, arms at her sides, watching quietly. People like this usually did not speak to her unless they had no other choice. The back door opened wider. A young girl began to step out. Tessa's eyes narrowed, not with judgment, but with deep attention. The girl moved slowly, carefully, as if the ground could shift under her at any moment. Heavy metal braces wrapped around her legs from thigh to ankle. Every joint looked stiff. Every step looked forced. The girl gripped the door frame tightly as she lowered herself down. Tessa felt something pull tight inside her chest. The girl paused once both feet touched the ground. She stood there, breathing through her nose, her young face calm but tired. Tessa could see the effort it took just to stay upright. Then the girl's mother stepped out. She was tall, composed, and dressed in clothes that spoke of comfort and control. Her hair was neat, her posture firm. This was a woman used to being listened to. Tessa did not know her name yet, but she knew her kind. Money had shaped this woman's entire life. The mother rested a hand lightly near the girl, ready to help if needed, but not touching. There was love and care in that careful distance. Tessa noticed everything. The driver walked over to Tessa and cleared his throat politely. He explained the SUV's problem, overheating, warning lights flashing on the dashboard. His voice was respectful but tense. Tessa nodded and listened without rushing. She asked simple, clear questions. Then she walked to the front of the SUV and opened the hood. As she worked, her eyes kept drifting back to the girl now sitting on the old bench near the garage wall. The braces looked far too rigid. Tessa tried to push the thought away. It was not her place. She was a mechanic, not a doctor. Still, the longer she looked, the more wrong it felt. The mother helped the girl sit more comfortably. The girl shifted slightly, her face tightening for just a second before she smoothed the pain away. Tessa saw that too. Tessa finished checking the engine and wiped her hands clean. She walked closer to the bench, slow and respectful. "Does it always feel that tight?" she asked softly, nodding toward the braces. The girl blinked, surprised. Most people talked over her, around her, or not at all. She looked at her mother, unsure. The mother hesitated, then nodded gently. "You can answer, sweetheart." The girl swallowed. "Yes," she said quietly. "It hurts sometimes." Tessa crouched down so she was closer to eye level, careful not to touch anything yet. "How long have you been wearing them?" The girl answered, "Since I was 8, after the accident." The mother let out a slow breath. "Her name is Sophie. I'm Natalia." Tessa nodded. "I'm Tessa." Natalia watched her carefully. Tessa studied the braces without touching them at first. The joints were locked too tight. The angle was all wrong. The weight pulled downward instead of supporting forward movement. It was wrong, clear as a bent axle. Tessa stood up slowly. "These are not built right," she said quietly. The words hung in the air between them. Natalia stiffened. "Excuse me," she said, voice sharp but controlled. "These braces were made by the best doctors and engineers in the country." Tessa did not argue back. I'm not saying they meant any harm, she replied calmly. I'm saying the balance is wrong. The pressure points are hurting her. Sophie looked between the two women, her small hands gripping the bench tightly. Natalia's jaw tightened. You're a mechanic. Yes, Tessa said, and you think you know better than doctors. Tessa met her eyes without blinking. I know metal. I know joints. And I know when something is fighting the body instead of helping it. Silence filled the garage. Sophie spoke next, her voice soft but clear. Mom, can she look closer? Natalia looked at her daughter. Fear and hope sat side by side on her face. Tessa waited, completely still. Finally Natalia nodded. Carefully, she said. Tessa knelt and examined the braces with permission. The flaws were now painfully obvious. Someone had built these to look strong, not to move well. Tessa's heart sank. She looked up at Sophie. I think I can help, she said gently. But I cannot promise anything. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. That is more than anyone has said in years. Natalia swallowed hard. Outside, traffic kept moving, completely unaware that something fragile and powerful had just begun. And Tessa knew deep down that once she touched those braces, there would be no turning back. Tessa did not touch the braces right away. After Natalia gave permission, she stayed still for a few long seconds, steadying herself. She understood exactly what this moment meant. Once she started, the responsibility would be enormous. If she was wrong, the blame would be crushing. If she was right, the weight would be even heavier. She reached for a clean cloth and wiped her hands thoroughly, making sure no oil remained on her fingers. Then she knelt in front of Sophie again, moving with the same care she gave to delicate engines. Tell me where it hurts the most, Tessa said softly. Sophie hesitated, then answered honestly, everywhere, but mostly here. She tapped near her knees, and here, pointing to her calves. Tessa nodded. She did not rush. She looked closely at the metal joints, the bolts, the straps. She pressed gently, watching Sophie's face for any sign of pain. Natalia stood nearby, arms crossed tightly, eyes following every single movement. She had learned the hard way that trust could cost her daughter dearly. Tessa studied the angle of Sophie's legs. The braces were forcing her knees backward instead of supporting them forward. The heavy metal pulled down, not up. Every step Sophie took was a fight against the very thing meant to help her. Tessa stood and walked to her workbench. She picked up a marker and a scrap of cardboard. She drew simple lines, showing Natalia how weight should flow through a leg, how pressure should be shared instead of trapped. These joints are locked, Tessa explained. They should move with her, not against her. This part here is too heavy, it's pulling her down. Natalia listened, her face unreadable. These braces cost more than this entire garage, she said. Doctors designed them. Engineers approved them. Tessa met her gaze. I believe you. But I also believe they were built for safety first, not comfort. And comfort matters. Without it, the body learns to fear movement. Sophie looked down at her legs. That makes sense, she whispered. I'm always scared before I even stand. Those words hit Tessa hard. Anger rose inside her. Not at Natalia, but at a system that had failed this child despite all the money in the world. I want to rebuild them, Tessa said quietly. Not replace them completely. Rebuild them, lighter parts, better movement. No charge. Natalia's voice sharpened. No charge. Why? Tessa shrugged slightly. Because I cannot promise you anything. And because she deserves comfort whether it works or not. Sophie's hands trembled on the bench. Mom, please. Natalia closed her eyes. For years she had made every decision alone, strong, expensive decisions. Now the ground felt like it was shifting beneath her. How long? She asked. 2 or 3 days, Tessa replied, if you let me work at my own pace. Natalia exhaled slowly. I will stay. I will watch everything. Tessa nodded. I would expect nothing less. They helped Sophie stand carefully and Natalia guided her back into the SUV. Tessa watched them drive away, her stomach tight with worry and hope. That night, Tessa stayed late. She carried the braces inside, laid them out on the floor, and took them apart piece by piece, bolts, joints, plates. She labeled everything. She measured angles and weight. She shook her head more than once. They built you wrong, she whispered to the metal. She worked until her hands ached. She used lighter metal she had saved for years. She reshaped joints so they would allow smoother movement. She softened every sharp edge. She tested every single piece against pressure and motion. She finally slept on an old chair near the workbench. The next morning Natalia arrived early with Sophie. Tessa was already working. You didn't go home, Natalia said. Tessa smiled faintly. I had work to do. Sophie leaned forward to see the parts laid out. They look different. They will feel different too, Tessa replied. She explained every change in simple words. Sophie listened closely, asking thoughtful questions. Natalia stayed quiet, watching Tessa's hands, her focus, her care. Over the next 2 days the little garage transformed. It was no longer just a place of grease and tools. It became a place of hope. Sophie sat nearby every day, watching Tessa work. She shared stories of hospitals, of pain, of learning to hide fear behind smiles. Tessa listened without interrupting, without offering pity. Natalia noticed everything. By the 3rd day the new braces were ready. Tessa set them on the table carefully. They were lighter, sleeker, perfectly balanced. Sophie touched them slowly. They don't feel cold, she said. Tessa smiled. That's because they're not fighting you anymore. Natalia's heart beat fast. If this hurts her, we stop immediately. Tessa nodded. They helped Sophie sit. Tessa adjusted the braces around her legs, tightening the straps just enough. Sophie inhaled sharply. Does it hurt? Tessa asked. Sophie shook her head. No. It feels strange, but good. Tessa guided her gently. Try bending your knee. Sophie did. Her eyes widened. It moves, she whispered. Natalia's hands flew to her mouth. Tessa stepped back. Stand when you're ready. Sophie placed her hands on her walker. She pushed down slowly. Her legs shook, but they did not buckle. She stood. Natalia let out a broken sound and tears streamed down her face as she watched her daughter stand taller than she had in years. Take your time, Tessa said calmly. Sophie took one step, then another. She laughed, a sound full of pure disbelief. I'm doing it, she whispered. Then louder, I'm walking. Natalia collapsed to her knees, sobbing. My baby. Tessa felt tears in her own eyes but stayed steady. Sophie walked across the garage floor, each step stronger than the last. Natalia reached out and hugged her daughter tightly. You are, she cried. You are. Tessa turned away briefly to give them space. When she turned back, Natalia grabbed her hands. You did this. Tessa shook her head. She did. Sophie looked at Tessa with gratitude that words could never hold. Outside, life went on as usual. Inside that small garage, something rare and beautiful had happened. And Tessa knew this was only the beginning. The garage felt different after Sophie walked. The air was the same. The cracked floor was still there. The tools still hung on the wall. But something unseen had changed forever. Tessa could feel it in the full, heavy silence. Sophie sat down slowly, her legs shaking from the effort, but she was smiling. Natalia stayed close, one hand on Sophie's shoulder, the other still trembling. Tessa knelt again and adjusted a strap that had loosened slightly. She worked with the same calm steadiness, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. "Tell me if anything feels wrong," she said. Sophie nodded. "I will. But right now it feels right. For the first time, it feels right." Those words stayed with Tessa. Natalia wiped her face and stood. She looked around the garage again, really looked this time. The chipped paint, the old shelves, the worn tools that had been repaired more times than she could count. She thought of all the clean white hospitals she had visited for years, the quiet offices, the expensive machines. None of them had given her this moment. "How did you know?" Natalia asked quietly. Tessa leaned against the workbench. "I didn't know," she answered honestly. "I saw something that didn't make sense, and I listened to it." Natalia nodded slowly. "Doctors never listened," she said. "They talked. They explained. But they never listened." Sophie rested her head against the chair. "They talked about me like I wasn't there," she added softly. "Tessa talks to me." Tessa felt a tightness in her chest. "You're the one wearing them," she said. "Your body should lead the conversation." They stayed in the garage for a long time that day. Sophie practiced standing, sitting, standing again. Tessa made tiny adjustments that made movement easier. Natalia watched every step, every breath, afraid to look away in case the moment vanished. When they finally left that evening, Sophie was exhausted but glowing. Natalia turned at the door. "We'll come back tomorrow." Tessa nodded. "I'll be here." That night Tessa closed the garage and sat alone on the workbench. Her hands shook slightly now that everything was quiet. She had crossed a line she could never uncross. Word would spread. Questions would come. And with questions came pressure. She stared at the floor and whispered, "Please let this be real." The next day they returned early. Sophie walked into the garage using her walker, but her steps were noticeably steadier. Tessa noticed immediately. Natalia noticed too, though she said nothing. Tessa guided Sophie through simple movements, side steps, slow turns, controlled stops. Each movement built trust between body and support. Sophie grimaced once, then smiled again. "It still scares me," she admitted. Tessa nodded. "That's normal. Fear takes time to unlearn." Natalia watched Tessa even more carefully now, studying her face, her tone. There was no pride, no hunger for praise, only pure focus. By afternoon a man from the neighborhood stopped by. He had heard something, seen something. He looked at Sophie standing and whispered, "Is this real?" Tessa met his eyes. "It's her work," she said. "I just helped." The man left shaking his head. By evening more people slowed their steps near the garage. No one entered yet, but eyes lingered. Natalia noticed. "This is going to get attention," she said quietly. Tessa exhaled. "I know." On the third day a woman approached Natalia outside. She recognized her instantly. Her voice trembled. "Is it true? Did she help your daughter?" Natalia looked at Tessa, then back at the woman. "Yes." The woman cried. Inside, Sophie practiced walking without holding the bench. "I want to try alone," she said. Natalia stiffened. "Maybe not yet." Sophie looked at her mother. "I need to trust myself too." Tessa waited. Natalia swallowed hard. "Okay." Sophie took a breath and let go. Her body swayed, slightly, then steadied. She took one step, then another. Natalia covered her mouth again. "I'm doing it," Sophie said, voice shaking with joy. Tessa smiled softly. "Yes, you are." That moment did not belong to science or money. It belonged to courage. Later that afternoon, Natalia asked Tessa to sit with her. "I need to understand something," she said. "Why you?" Tessa shrugged. "I fix what breaks, people included." Natalia studied her face. "Do you know who I am?" Tessa nodded. "I know you have money." Natalia almost laughed. "That's not what I meant." Tessa met her gaze. "Money didn't bring her here. Fear did." Natalia looked down. "You're right." That night Natalia made a call. She did not say much. She simply said, "I found someone." The next morning 2 men in suits appeared near the garage. They watched. They whispered. Tessa felt it immediately. Natalia approached her. "They're from a medical company. They want to see what you did." Tessa's stomach tightened. "I didn't steal anything." "I know," Natalia replied. "But they won't see it that way." Inside, Sophie practiced walking again. She had not noticed the men yet. Tessa watched her and made a choice. "I will not hide," she said. "I did nothing wrong." Natalia nodded slowly. "Neither did my daughter." The men entered the garage. One smiled too quickly. "We heard you built something special." Tessa wiped her hands calmly. "I rebuilt something that was broken," she replied. The man glanced at Sophie. "That is not your field." Tessa looked him straight in the eye. Neither was hers, until it was. The room grew quiet. Sophie stood taller. Natalia stepped beside Tessa, and in that moment Tessa understood clearly. Helping Sophie was only the beginning. What she had done could not be undone, and the world was about to respond. The 2 men stood inside Tessa's garage like they owned the space. Their shoes were clean, their clothes sharp. They did not belong here, and everyone felt it. Tessa stayed exactly where she was. "What exactly did you change?" one asked, voice calm but firm. Tessa looked at Sophie first. The girl stood near the bench, holding her walker loosely, face steady but alert. Natalia stood beside her, one hand resting on Sophie's back. "I changed what was hurting her," Tessa said. The man tilted his head. "You understand these devices are protected designs." Tessa nodded. "I understand pain. And I understand balance." The second man glanced at Sophie's legs. "She should not be standing like that." Natalia felt Sophie tense and leaned closer. "She is standing because she can," Natalia said firmly. "Not because you allow it." The men exchanged a look. "We would like to examine the braces." Tessa shook her head. "Not without her consent." Sophie lifted her chin. "I do not want you touching them." The man smiled thinly. "You do not understand the risk." Sophie met his eyes. "I understand my body." The garage fell silent. Natalia felt pride swell in her chest. For years her daughter's voice had been ignored. Today it filled the room. The men stepped back. "We will be in contact," one said. When they left, the garage felt smaller. Tessa leaned against the workbench and let out a long breath. Natalia turned to her. "This will not end quietly." Tessa nodded. "I know." Sophie looked between them. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," both women said at once. Natalia crouched in front of her daughter. "You did something brave." Sophie smiled faintly. "I felt brave." They stayed together that afternoon, practicing walking again. Tessa focused only on movement, adjusting when needed. Sophie moved more freely now, her body learning trust again. By evening Natalia asked Tessa to walk with her outside. The street was loud. Cars passed. People glanced at them. I want to help you, Natalia said. Not just thank you. Tessa shook her head. I did what I should. You did what no one else could, Natalia replied. That matters. I can offer you a job, Natalia continued. A good one. Equipment, support, security. Tessa stopped walking. I do not want to leave. Natalia frowned slightly. Leave what? This, Tessa said, gesturing toward the garage. This is where people come when they have nowhere else. Natalia studied her face. You could help more people with more resources. Tessa looked away. Resources change people. Natalia sighed. Then let me help without changing you. The next day the garage was busier than ever. People came with questions, some with hope, some with doubt. Tessa worked through it all, careful not to promise anything she could not give. Sophie sat nearby, greeting people, telling her story in small, honest words. Children watched her walk. Parents cried quietly. A woman approached Tessa late that afternoon. My son has braces. They hurt him. Tessa nodded. Bring them tomorrow. Natalia watched this happen and understood something new. This was not about one miracle. It was about many small chances. That night Natalia sat alone in her home, staring at old photos of Sophie in hospital beds. She cried quietly, not from pain this time, but from deep relief. The next morning Natalia returned with papers. I will fund a new space, she said quietly. No press, no control. Tessa looked at the papers but did not touch them. Why? Natalia's voice broke. Because my daughter stood today. Tessa swallowed hard. I will not own you, Natalia continued. I will not direct you. I will only remove the walls in your way. Tessa thought of the bills on her bench, the cracked floor, the people who came here carrying fear in their eyes. I need time, she said. Natalia nodded. Take it. That afternoon the men from the company returned, this time with a lawyer. Tessa stood her ground. You will not scare me, she said. Natalia stepped forward. You will not touch her. Sophie stood taller than she ever had. You will not erase this. The lawyer spoke of rules and risks. Tessa listened and responded calmly. I fixed something broken. If you want to stop me, you will have to explain why pain matters less than profit. The lawyer left without another word. The tension lingered, but something stronger grew, trust. That evening Tessa sat alone in the garage again. She looked at the braces hanging on the wall and touched them gently. She thought of her own childhood, watching her mother work through pain, never asking for help. She thought of how fixing things had become her language. She whispered, this is bigger than me. The next day Sophie walked into the garage without her walker. Natalia froze. I just want to try, Sophie said. Tessa stood nearby. Slow. Sophie stepped forward. Her legs shook, but they held. She took another step. Natalia's breath caught. Tessa did not move. Sophie smiled. I feel strong. Tessa felt tears slide down her face. You are. That moment settled something deep inside Tessa. Later that day she called Natalia. I'm ready, Tessa said. But it has to be on my terms. Natalia smiled on the other end of the line. Always. As the sun set over Chicago, the garage glowed with warm light. People gathered outside, not to stare, but to wait. Tessa looked at Sophie walking and laughing softly. This was no longer just a garage. It was a beginning, and the hardest choices were still ahead. The new workshop did not open with noise. There was no crowd, no music, no speeches, no cameras. Tessa wanted it that way. She believed some places deserved quiet beginnings. Places built for healing should not start with shouting. The building sat on a calm street in Chicago, not far from where her old garage once stood. The walls were clean but plain. The windows were wide so light could enter freely. Inside, the floors were smooth and safe. Every table was steady. Every tool had a place. Nothing glittered. Nothing tried to impress. Tessa stood just inside the door that morning, holding a cup of coffee she had forgotten to drink. She moved slowly through the room, touching the edge of each table, checking every tool again even though she had checked them the night before. This place did not belong to money. It belonged to people. Natalia arrived without warning. No driver, no assistance. She parked her car herself and walked in alone. Tessa heard the door open and turned. For a moment they simply looked at each other. Natalia smiled softly. "You did it." Tessa nodded. "We did." Natalia walked around the room, her steps slow and careful. She noticed the low chairs placed near the walls, the handrails along one side, the open space in the center meant for walking practice. "You thought about everything," Natalia said. Tessa shook her head. "I thought about how it feels to be scared." Those words stayed with Natalia. Before either woman could speak again, the door opened. Sophie stepped inside. She was not using her walker. She moved slowly, steady but careful, like someone who trusted the ground but still listened to it. Her face carried a calm confidence that once felt impossible. Tessa's chest tightened. "You came early," she said. Sophie smiled. "I didn't want to miss the first day." Natalia's eyes filled with tears. She did not try to hide them. Tessa walked toward Sophie, stopping just short of touching her. "How do they feel today?" she asked gently. Sophie shifted her weight, bending her knees slightly. "Strong," she said. "They feel like part of me now." Tessa closed her eyes for a brief moment. She felt the weight of that sentence settle inside her. Not long after, the first visitors arrived. A mother holding the hand of a small boy who walked unevenly. An older man leaning on a cane, his face tight with pain and pride. A teenage girl with braces too tight for her thin legs, her eyes filled with quiet fear. Tessa greeted each one herself. She did not rush. She did not promise miracles. She listened. She asked where it hurt. She asked what scared them. She asked what they hoped for but had stopped saying out loud. Sophie stayed close, helping when she could. She spoke to the children first, crouching down so they could see her face. "I used to be scared too," she told them. "I still get scared sometimes, but it gets easier when someone listens." The children listened. Parents watched from the side, tears falling without warning. Tessa worked all morning. She adjusted braces. She studied movement. She explained every step in words anyone could understand. When someone needed rest, she made space for it. When someone felt ashamed, she met them with calm respect. Natalia watched quietly. She had been inside the best hospitals in the country. She had seen white walls, bright machines, doctors who spoke fast and avoided long eye contact. None of those places felt like this. Here, people were not rushed. Here, pain was not ignored. By midday the workshop felt full, not with noise, but with life. A man stood near the door for a long time before entering. His clothes were worn, his shoulders tight. Tessa noticed him and walked over. "Can I help you?" He swallowed. "My sister, she needs braces. We cannot pay much." Tessa opened the door wider. "Come in. We will start with listening." The man's eyes filled with tears. As the day passed, Sophie took small walks across the room, stopping to rest when needed. Each step was quiet proof of how far she had come. Natalia followed her daughter with her eyes, remembering nights spent beside hospital beds, holding Sophie's hand while machines beeped softly. She remembered begging doctors for answers, for hope, for something that felt human. Now she watched her daughter walk freely inside a space built by a woman who once struggled to pay her own bills. In the late afternoon, Tessa finally sat down on a bench near the wall. Her hands were sore, her back ached, but her face was calm. Sophie joined her. "Do you know what you did?" Sophie asked softly. Tessa shook her head. "I helped where I could." Sophie smiled. "You gave people back their courage." Tessa looked away. "You gave yourself yours." Sophie leaned her head against the wall. "You were the first person who looked at me and did not see a problem to hide." Natalia sat beside them. "I spent my life believing control was the answer," she said quietly. "I thought if I paid enough, pushed enough, demanded enough, things would change." Tessa listened. "I was wrong," Natalia continued. "Change came when I stopped fighting and started trusting." Tessa met her eyes. "You trusted me with your daughter." Natalia nodded. "With the most important part of my life." The room grew quiet again. In the weeks that followed, the workshop became a steady place. Not famous, not loud, but known. Tessa trained a small team, choosing people who listened more than they spoke. She taught them how to read movement, how to notice fear, how to respect pain. Sophie volunteered every afternoon after her classes. She greeted families, helped children practice standing, reminded parents that progress did not need to be fast to be real. Natalia supported everything quietly, no announcements, no interviews. She protected the space from pressure, from companies that wanted control, from people who wanted credit. One evening, after everyone had left, Tessa stood alone again. She walked slowly through the workshop, turning off lights, locking cabinets, checking doors. She remembered her old garage, the cracked floor, the night she stayed awake wondering how long she could survive. She was not rich now. She was not famous. But she was needed. Tessa stepped outside and locked the door. Sophie waited for her near the sidewalk. "I walked here alone today," she said, pride filling her voice. Tessa smiled. "That is a long walk." "It felt short," Sophie replied. "When fear is not leading." Natalia joined them, placing a gentle hand on Sophie's shoulder. The sun was low, painting the city in warm golden light. Cars passed. People walked by, unaware of what had been built here. A poor black woman mechanic, a billionaire mother, a girl who once believed her body had betrayed her. Their lives had crossed by chance. Their bond stayed by choice. Tessa spoke softly. "I used to think fixing things was about tools." Natalia listened. "Now I know," Tessa continued, "it is about seeing what others ignore." Sophie smiled. "And staying when others leave." Natalia wiped her eyes. They stood together until the light faded. Inside the workshop, braces hung neatly, ready for tomorrow, ready for new stories, ready for new lives waiting to change. Tessa took a slow breath. Tomorrow would bring more pain, more doubt, more hard work. But tonight, hope stood on its own 2 feet. And it was not going anywhere. Dear viewers, this story is not just about Tessa, Sophie, and Natalia. It is about how hope can come from places we never expect. It is about how pain can last for years and still be changed by one person who chooses to care. It reminds us that money can buy many things, but it cannot replace patience, kindness, and the courage to truly see another human being. Tessa did not have power, fame, or protection. She only had her hands, her heart, and the choice to speak when silence was easier. Sophie did not get a miracle overnight. She got something deeper: dignity, confidence, and a future she once believed was impossible. And Natalia learned that letting go can sometimes save the very thing you are trying to protect. If this story touched you in any way, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs hope today. Your support helps us continue bringing you stories that matter. We would also love to hear from you. Tell us where you are watching from and what lesson this story taught you. If you want more emotional and powerful stories like this, comment "more stories," and you will be the first to receive the next one. Now here are 3 important questions. Please answer them in the comments. Do you believe true miracles come from money and power, or from kindness and courage, and why? If you were Natalia, would you have trusted Tessa at the risk of everything, or walked away in fear? What part of Sophie's journey moved you the most? Her pain, her courage, or her first steps forward? Thank you for watching, for listening, and for believing in stories that heal.